I'm not sure what happened. So
you can go on.
Angus?
We can go on, I'm saying.
Okay. So Oshun agahlukile mangibuyisa la back in the South. I can only speak from a perspective the South. She kind of reminds me of Umujaji as well. You know, fertility.
The rain queen.
Yes, like she's also embodies like fertility. You know, in some way, or Ashanti.
The Ashanti. The goddesses of the Ashanti.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right, origin. But now when you talk about Ashanti, now you're talking about living Mujaji and Ashanti, you're talking about living queens, people who are actual, not natural forces in terms of like, you know, we have this word neteru, or neter, which is a divine force, a divine being, who is not an historical being, but a divine being, a spiritual being.
If you follow the history, it's not really like so the person is like Mozweti umele idlos lo muntu loyo.
Yes.
You're not necessarily looking. Yes, there is a living being that is called Mujaji. Yes, but then when she dies, another Mujaji will be placed.
Yes, she's always be called Mujaji.
Yes.
So it's a title.
Yes. I feel like she's there as
an office.
Not necessarily office.
Yeah, I'm using a very formal word. When I say an office, I'm like, it's like an institution. Let me give you an example, a quick example. Especially, you know, I like to give this Zimbabwean examples because I lived in Zimbabwe a bit. In Zimbabwe, we have Mbuyane. And this Mbuyane, there's a lot of arguments around her. Because people like to, you know, make statues and make figures. There's this picture of her being captured by the British in the early 19th century. She was a warrior queen in Zimbabwe. She fought against colonialists, both physically helping the soldiers and also, how can I say, spiritually guiding them in the forest and all those things. But when you speak about that person, you're speaking about, they call it Nasikana, I think, Nyasikana, which means Ntomazane. It's a young maiden, a woman who walks with lions, a young girl who walks with lions. Now, this particular this particular Mbuyane is a person that embodies the spirit of the goddess Nehanda, who is there almost every century. There is a Nehanda who takes over. When one Nehanda passes on to her ancestors, there's another Nehanda, but she's always related to holy war, so to speak. She's a healer, uses herbs and all that, but her main mission is the defense of the nation, defense of her people, you know? But there was a particular time when she was only for Zimbabweans, but now you've got Mbuyane all over the world, the black world, the African world, people calling themselves by Mbuyane. Also people like, I have a partner that I work with, she calls herself, her name, this is her name now, Ya Ashantewa. So when you said Ashante, I was like, Ya Ashantewa is a historical figure in Ghana, a particular figure. But then perhaps she is just an embodiment, that particular figure who also fought like Mbuyane is an embodiment of a sacred spirit that has always been there, of that goddess that has always been there, Ashanti.
Yes.
I hope I'm not very wrong, but it sounds like that. And there's many. There's Nzinga, but Nzinga is a particular name in Angola, but probably comes from a long line of warrior queens.
Nzinga was
sounds like we're talking about Sekhmet.
Nzinga was a warrior queen. So
yes.
But for me, Uheteru, she, you know, Oshun, same, you know. Oshun is from the Yoruba. It's from the Yoruba. But for me, it's the same because Naya is fertility and sensuality as well, you know. And it's all ulama. I call it usually during Imantha Yaga Mama. I usually say it's the silly month, you know. And by silly, I mean Wuti is the only month where you're permitted to be silly, depending on how you define silly. But you let go of your inhibitions, you know, and you just embrace everything that we've been taught that it's bad, you know. We've been taught Wuti drinking alcohol, this is the only month where you can indulge.
Without guilt.
No one is supposed to
judge. How drunk can you get?
Indulge sensuality as well. And I think remember last month we said, I almost feel like there's no overlap in terms of the energies that they embody, because this is the month when most people actually conceive, nakon. During Osa, Uti Heteru, it's the month where people generally conceive a lot. Most people conceive. Energy, and it's okay. Hence, this month we decided to name it Sacred Unions. And we were talking about Ubuti, what is a sacred union?
Okay, yeah. All right. I'm going to allow our sisters to speak in right now, but let me just say this first. Because we would like people to participate on this particular one, on the definition itself now of sacred union. In our conversation, our private conversations, Nkosi, we were speaking basically. Okay, let me start it from here. Last year, when we did this particular, when we focused on this neter, we called it cultivating natural joy. And the reason why and we had a guest who it is part of her work. I think we had a man and a woman, but the particular female guest, Ukoko Taz, she was the kind of guest that is very much her work. I don't know what she does now. I haven't spoken to her in a while, but part of her Uisangoma, but her focus is she focuses a lot on opulence, on beauty, on cultivating joy in your life, in your personal life, before you even cultivate it in your romantic life, romantic life, love life. It's a lot about opulence. It's a lot about gold. It's a lot about ukuzithanda, embracing yourself and really anointing yourself, even celebrating that goddess within you. So that's what we spoke about last year in cultivating natural joy. And then we spoke about the various ways on how we can cultivate that natural joy. But this year we said, let's focus really much. We call it Sacred Union because we wanted to focus really on sex. Sex, but more like the readiness, the kind of, I don't want to use the word foreplay, but kind of look at the sensuality before the act of sex itself. We can talk about sex, the act, but the main thing that we wanted to really focus on was how to cultivate a healthy relationship with sensuality, your own sensuality of yourself, within yourself, before you go and engage with somebody else. How do you become that sacred being yourself so that even when you engage in a sacred union, then you are ready, you come there fully equipped, spiritually, physically, psychologically. So we wanted to talk about those kinds of things. Is there anything that maybe our sisters would like to add on that? Just feel free to unmute and you can speak and then we can continue on that.
It's the funniest thing. I'm listening to you say that how does one prepare themselves before the act,
Yes.
I there's a lot of, how can I put it? There's a lot of awakening that has happened over the past year and a half, let's say during this COVID period, where people actually came to the realization that the sexual act itself is spiritual. Not a lot of us understood the magnitude of how that act was spiritual. Yes. So so when you say, how do we prepare ourselves? For me, the question would be, how many of us understand the spirituality, that surrounds it? Because for years, it was just something that, that happens between two people. And we're not raised in homes that teach you the sense of the spirituality that comes around such a sacred union, such a sacred act. We're just told ukuthi mawulala nomfana uzoba nomntana, you know, or you should just stay away because it's for married people. You know, that's the notion that we've grown up with. And only Masesikula, for me, I can honestly say that only when I started having my spiritual awakening, that's when I understood the sacredness of it, the spirituality behind it. But without me having had the awakening, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have actually known the spirituality around that, the act itself. So for me, I think I don't have really an answer, but I would say, how do we first understand the spirituality behind it for us then to prepare ourselves? Because if we don't understand the spirituality behind it, how can we prepare for something that we do not know?
That's so true. And you know what my biggest issue has always been is that people, we tend to not speak about it, so therefore we don't understand it. And for me, for this season, that's why we said, you know what, can we just talk about sex, you know, instead of tiptoeing around it, making it seem as if it's taboo or something like that. You know, there's nothing wrong with sex. It's just that at this day and age in which we live in, we tend to, what's this? It's used as a weapon now. Bekele has the hand raised.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, I just wanted to add. So when we say sex is a spiritual act, right? I feel like we're almost saying everything else is not spiritual, you know? Like you can just live your life, but then sex is spiritual. And then by them doing that, then that's how, to me anyway, like my own observation, it then becomes turned into this thing that is like a weapon, especially against women, not even against men. So I am of the notion of life is spiritual, you know, you wake up, whatever you're doing, you know, like drinking water, you are basically, you know, like energy into your life, you know, like, so to me, everything is spiritual, you know, but don't make sex something which is more sacred than even breathing air, you know, and because also when we say something is spiritual, I tend to see within things which there can be pleasure and happiness and joy and fun with this act because it's spiritual, you know. So like I'm not disputing the spiritual act, you know. To me, life is spiritual anyway, you know. So then I feel like we need to also acknowledge unity. Sex is pleasure, you know, but because we want it to be something taboo or something, no, you know, and then people start throwing terms like king, soul, what, and all these weird terms, you know, and then and then I'm you know. So anyway, but then going back to a question Mkulu when he started, to me, I think like with everything else, but I suppose more important with sex, you know, and mainly for maybe I'm gonna say females, because so many of us have been abused and what, you know, it goes back to, we need to know ourselves, we need to love ourselves, we need to know how to give ourselves pleasure first before we can even open up to another human being, you know. So once you are comfortable and you are happy and you know yourself, then you can just open up onto the world. But that's just my take. I'll speak for like hours on this topic.
I love the point that you're raising right now, Uguti. The reason why it has become weaponized is because we wanna elevate it to be more important than other than other acts of like as you said, life is spiritual, everything that you do is spiritual. And I think if we approached everything like that, same as what last season when we had Ras Heru, and he was like, if you disrespect nature, therefore you disrespect yourself, you know. And when you say the act of breathing in itself is spiritual, is also spiritual. So everything, the food that you eat is also spiritual. So life in itself, everything that you do is spiritual. Nita? You had your
yeah. I agree with Ukele on the totality that life in its total sense is spiritual. But I want to backtrack again. You said it's a round table, right? So
yes.
we can backtrack and go in circles.
Yeah, it's going around.
So she says that when we use the sense of spirituality around sex, then we weaponize it and we forget the essence of pleasure in itself. And sometimes I think there's that thin line that you are right. People then weaponize it and then we forget that we are spirits that are having a human experience, right? We still have to live life. And even if we have to live that life, understanding what surrounds it makes us better people. By me saying that, it's like there's a time I went to the beach a couple of months ago, and I got there and the water was red. And as soon as I got there and the ocean was red, I stopped and I said, today's not a good day. A lot of people got into the water and they swam, and I sat back and I said, today Mother Nature is saying, I need a break. I can't do this with you guys today. Give me a break. There were no waves. There was no wind. It was still and it was red. And I took that sense of respect that I'm not going to get into this water. It needs us out of it until it's okay for us to get in, right? So backtracking to sex, I think it's the same thing. We must not fall in between blurred lines of understanding pleasure and falling far from pleasure and understanding sex in itself spiritually. Because other people, as much as we might think that they weaponize it, they fall under the sense of they go beyond pleasure and it becomes an obsession. It falls beyond pleasure and then it becomes an act that is used to harm people, or it becomes an act where people do it regardless. Every weekend, umuntu lala nomunye umuntu, and there is no a stop. So I feel like if we then put it in the sense of it is spiritual, sometimes the spirituality guides us on when we ourselves can offer ourselves to somebody. And when sometimes we need to sit back and say, not today. Today, I want a break from myself, or I do not want to partake in this union, So what I wanted to say in closing is that as much as we forget the pleasure that comes with sex, we mustn't also forget that it can also harm us spiritually. Because Anyeke City, I want to follow pleasure, and forgetting that when we follow pleasure, Ukele says that they are soul ties, and they are real. Those things are real, especially when you become a spiritual healer or a person who believes in the awakening of the universe. You then realize that uthwala abantu. Then you say to yourself, you are carrying all the burdens of the people you opened yourself to. So sometimes you need to understand where your barriers lie. Yes, feel the pleasure. Yes, enjoy yourself. You're a spirit having a human experience, but know where to put your boundaries. That's why we say it is spiritual, because that is like a guidance to say, ungahambi beyond, because going beyond, it becomes a temptation. Then going beyond, it becomes an obsession. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
May I ask a question, taking a leaf from Gele's book, would we not say the same thing about food? Because there is that element of pleasure nakhona in food, and when you overindulge, that's when you're now polluting your body. Would we not then say the same thing? Because also, if you indulge too much in certain foods, that's when poop, and I don't know, would we not say the same about food?
Yes, well? It's going back to Kelly's thing. You are right. Life in itself, in its totality, is spiritual. But you need, that's why I'm saying, as much as it's so spiritual, but we also need to understand the boundaries. I like when you even made the example of food, because everything that we do, we need to understand the essence of it. Not about you mustn't be greedy. Don't have greed. Umuntu adle until achokoza. That becomes greed.
No.
And then well, you were saying something, Kelly.
No, I wanted to say, as Uting was speaking, I was just thinking about Uti. In as much as I said Uti, everything is spiritual, right? I mean, in everything we do, be it eating, be it whatever, you need to also realize, Hori, if you are reckless, there's going to be consequences to that, right? If I decide, Uti, I'm only going to eat a magunya for your breakfast, and then tomorrow I shouldn't be surprised, because I mean, that's like a consequence of my actions, right? So I think my only thing is, nobody sits and says, Wuti, guys, you're all eating amakota every weekend, and then see, we elevated, we talk to people, but then as soon as we start eat sex, and then it's this thing, a taboo, and also everything goes towards the females, I am yet to hear people talk about how you slept with 20 girls last weekend. The next weekend, you are carrying a load of 100 girls. I am yet to be in an, within people talking about all those things. It's always us who are carrying people. Okay. So I think maybe that's why I'm extremely defensive, and I'm, yeah.
I have to come in there. I'm sorry, I just have to come in there, because what she's speaking about is exactly what I raised, Coco, earlier, about what I went on the Man on the Mountain thing, right? The other week, 2 weeks ago, I went on with Baba Bundy Nkosi in a solution. Sorry if I'm jumping into anyone's conversation, but the issue of men not talking about our issues. Nianges?
Yes, we can hear him good.
The issue of us not talking about our issues, there was 30 of us. By the way, I'm not going to tell you what people actually said, but I'm just going to give you a feel of what 30 men being on the. This is men from different backgrounds.
Tell us, Mkulu, tell us the secrets.
Men's conference.
I hope you're all dressed, Mkulu.
Man, he's struggling with network, yes.
Oh no.
It was about intimacy. The whole Man on the Mountain this time. There's different themes every time we go on the mountain, but this one was about intimacy. But then they took us to the core of our how can I say, the beginning of how were we first introduced to sex? Because that has a lot to do with how we may be behaving now, right? So it was very difficult for many of us to actually speak about our first encounters and all that, and even our encounters with abuse, and also our encounters as abusers, because our guides were taking us through everything. There was nothing left. There was no stone left unturned. I'm not stealing the conversation, ladies. I'm just trying to highlight to you that the fact that sexuality, as much as it is difficult, we understand fully the difficulty that women are going through. In many ways, I know many are healing, many are going through the healing, others are healing others, helping others to heal and to enjoy life as it was meant to be enjoyed. But men, I must tell you, and this is not an excuse, I'm telling you, this is a view into the lives of men. A lot of us as brothers are also heavily wounded. It may not be a woundedness, maybe through rape, but there's a woundedness sometimes through our fathers, our relationships with our fathers, the way we were treated as youths, and the way we treat our other men, we treat each other as boys, has a lot to do. And the world also, the media, the mass media, the things that we grow up watching, even if it's before porn, the music videos, the kind of church even, the religious thing with the man is the head, women submit, all of those kinds of messages, they create a kind of man who is not a natural man. Here in Ikhambi, we are talking about ourselves becoming more natural, more spiritual, right? More conscious. But a lot of us are not in that space yet. And in the places that we are growing up and the places that we are living, there is not a lot of platforms where those things can be shared. So the toxicity that you see is a toxicity that is also environmental, created by the environment, but also that we fall into. And we recreate it. we reproduce it because it is just there. You know, the hypersexualization of women, what's the word? Objectification of women is part of certain cultures. It's just there, and it's very bad. Lastly, I have to say this. I'm reading a book called King of Kings about His Majesty Haile Selassie. So in it, I'm finding a lot of, and it's a historical book. It speaks about him, but it also speaks about relationships between him and his father, and him and his mother, and him and his wife. But one of the stories that disturbed me is a story of the fact that his mother had 9 miscarriages before she conceived him, right? And then after all those 9 miscarriages, she got him and he became king. But the father, his father, Haile Selassie's father, Rastafari's father, still wanted another child. So this mother died at childbirth because the father only saw her as just a producer of children. So imagine, after 9 miscarriages, you have a child. But then after the child, somehow, I'm not saying it's wrong to have another child after you've had miscarriage. But for me, reflecting on that chapter, I sat down and thought, wow, no one ever writes about this woman, her heroism her heroism and the fact that she maintained her beauty and her dignity and so much after having suffered so much. Yet she still died after childbirth. Yet she's just a footnote in a story about a king. What about her story? So I'm sorry if I digress. I just felt like I needed to share that because there is that male, there's that masculinity, there's that patriarchy, which still continues, and we celebrate some parts of it. Even some women celebrate it, but it is very dangerous for women. The world is very dangerous for women. Let me just stop there for now. You can, Paula.
But Mkulu, does it not also go back to the kind of men we are raising? Yeah. Anita, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what Mkulu said, that we also need to understand that men themselves are wounded. That's why they act the way they act. And I truly believe that they say being a true feminist is understanding that every human person is broken. Being a true feminist doesn't mean that you need to hate men, but you need to understand why they act the way they act. And which is so true when I woke up, because a lot of people, and one issue, I think I put it on the chat, abandonment. I look at it even in the essence of my friends who are male. A lot of issues stem from abandonment. The sense of not having their father, the sense of being raised by their mother, the sense of their mother being the hero in everything that they do. And when they now project that feeling, they end up projecting it in a very negative way instead of dealing with the emotions. And I like when you say it's how we raise these kids. I have this thing of always being open with my son and saying to him, sometimes you're gonna have to feel, even when it makes you feel, oh, but people are gonna laugh at me, but feel that feeling and address that feeling, at that moment. And then after you have felt it, you need to tell yourself, why do I feel this way? Am I angry? Am I upset? Try and narrow down the feeling so you can understand the feeling. But this is going to take generations for a lot of men to heal. But I am a victim of abuse. But for a long time, I used to blame my abuser. So much so because I feel like, oh, I'm just a victim. Until I went through therapy, I understood that behind that man who abused me, there was a broken child. Behind that person, and it doesn't excuse his actions, but it made me understand that nobody wakes up to act that way. Nobody just goes, today I'm going to hurt a female. Today I'm going to make her feel less than a woman. There's an element and there's an essence of brokenness in that man that makes you feel that way. And I think understanding that, at the end of the day, as women, we end up feeling less than, be it in marriages or relationships or even working. It does, patriarchy is the essence of the world and how they perceive it. But I think it's how we then take it and we separate the man and the act. That's how I survive now. I separate the man and the act. Because if a man is being a bully at work, it's got nothing to do with him and the power at work. The question is, what is happening in his day-to-day life that is making him wanting to exert power in the workplace?
Yes.
So, you know, so
the
it's
emasculation.
yes.
Mm.
So I wish, Mkulu, that those mountain trips you take with other men should be documented, because these are the lessons that tomorrow our children need to understand, the conversations which are so hard that your fathers couldn't have with you, and today even their own fathers can't have with our young kids. Understanding that, you know, I remember I used to have we had an argument a while back with my brothers, and I was like, but women, we get abused more. And then my brother said, but who said I wasn't abused? Then I stopped for a while, and then I said, that is wrong of me to assume. You know, we always assume that women, we are 100% targets, but we forget there are also men who have been targeted, and they made to feel as if it's okay and it's natural for a man to want a woman, but sometimes that boy doesn't want to. That boy then becomes an angry boy that grows up to a man who becomes that abusive man.
Yes.
So I think it's understanding the humanity, the Ubuntu that you spoke about at the beginning, when we understand the essence of being human and how broken we are, then I think that's when the healing starts. That's when we stop pointing fingers between males and females and start treating each other as humans. We all visitors on this earth, having the same journey. There's no difference in the journey.
You know what I picked up with, as you were speaking, three things that I picked up is the fact that the act of sex is separated from emotion. Hence, we don't say umada heru, heteru. She's not about sex, she's about sensuality, you know. And when we start when you speak of sensuality, it's more than just the act of having sex, you know. There's a bit of emotions there. So if there's no emotions, therefore it becomes something else. And when you spoke about brokenness, I've been studying serial rapists for the past couple of months, and a lot of them have been raped. So basically, when I study these serial rapists, I go back from their childhood. Who were they raised by? What kind of environment did they grow up in? And how did they used to commit these acts, you know? And as I'm going through and studying each and every one of this, there's some element of brokenness. If we take, for instance, Ted Bundy, the most infamous, notorious serial rapist. He not only killed, he used to kill, but before he killed you, he would rape you, and not with his penis, but with objects as well, you know. And for me, when you look at his background, he grew up thinking that his mother was his sister, and growing up, he had some form of identity crisis. And other rapists, I forgot now, have been raped before. So what they're doing is something that has been done to them over and over again. And when you said the part about your mother, when she said, who said I was not abused? We often think that women get abused more than men, but does it not come from that mentality? Does it not then come from the concept that women are able to speak freely about, they've been given a platform to speak freely about their own sexual abuse stories? And even Namanja today in 2021, if a man goes to a police station to report that he has been raped, it's not given enough.
They laugh at him.
Yes, they laugh at him. Yes, they laugh at him. And these men are not only raped by other women, but they're also raped by other men, you know? And it almost sounds like it's a vicious cycle, and we're not cognizant in terms of our own, we only have this one-dimensional view, and we don't look at all aspects. Like that's when you spoke about that, a lot of things popped up in my mind.
Yeah, beloveds, you know, the strange thing about this conversation is that We thought we were going to talk about this beautiful thing that we are, that is at the center of our goddess, who is about enjoyment, dancing, ecstasy, her beautifulness. I mean, we started like that, but the reality of life is that in order to get to the pleasure, somehow we have to wade through all this.
The pain.
Something
Yes.
that Kelly said. Before I forget it, I want to just raise it up again. At first, a person may take this in a wrong way. And she said, before we pleasure others, we must be able to pleasure ourselves. The immediate thing that popped in my mind, besides, of course, masturbation, was, again, a kind of sacred, creative masturbation that happened. There's a myth, there's an ancient Egyptian myth, a Kemetic myth, or story. Let me just call them stories because people take the word myth wrongly. There's a story there's two different stories about how a particular deity, I think Atum, if I'm not mistaken, Atum Ra, pleasured himself in order to create human beings, But then there's another story of the same deity, the same supernatural power, crying himself because of loneliness. He was so lonely, he cried, and then the tears fell on the ground that he had created. But in the ground, there was nothing living. There was only trees and blah, 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 blah. But there was no human beings. There's nothing that he could reflect himself on, which is why even in our pledge, we say creators, because there are many different ways of approaching this thing. I mean, at first it means mother and father. When you say our creators, we are inviting mother and father. But there's also, in our African stories, there are many different levels and different, how can I say, phases of creation. It was not just a day, it was okay, one day, plonk, there was human beings. There was loneliness. Even Baba Kredomuto talks about Mama. I think it's what's her name? Ma. Longing for thousands of years, longing for a partner. But then when she finds this partner, this is another story now. When she finds the partner, she did not like him. He was ugly. Usimagate. He was, you know the story. She ran across the world, running away from this person that she was asking for all this time. But when the creator decided to say, no, nangu muntu wako, she was not happy about the way he looked. But there's a long story about how they chased each other, eventually loved each other, But there was a long process Baba Credo Musa takes us through about, the first mother and the first father, And then there's a sexual act there also that is described, which was not pleasant. But eventually, through some learning, through certain thing that happens between the mother and the father, they learn to understand each other, understand the way they look. Long story. But I just wanted to say that the things that we are seeing happening in the real world right now, they are prefigured in our primordial stories. So our issue now, our thing we must do now, the reason why we even do Ikhambi, is so that we can learn from these primordial stories how to conduct ourselves better in this life. Ashe.
It's so true, Mkulu, because I like when you say that. So since we're going back to a more lighter note and less heavier note,
yes.
In pleasure, how is it then taught? Ukele says you need to pleasure yourself first before others, which is true. Sometimes really it's not in the essence of masturbation. Sometimes it's in the essence of loving yourself. It's in the essence of respecting yourself. Yes. And then everything else just falls into place. But then how then is it taught? How do we then become better people in understanding that the act itself can be pleasurable? How do we learn? How do we teach the future generation? How do we teach our children that this act, as much as it's sacred, it can also be pleasurable? Because we don't know that because we were never taught that, right? We're learning as we go that maybe I like it this way, or maybe I would like, to engage in the act this way. But then how do we then teach the people or people around us and people who will be watching this on how best can we teach it to our kids? Because we are now the generation, I believe we are the generation to break generational curses, because there's so much awakening in this era. So how do you then teach these upcoming children born in the 2000s the element of pleasure and the sacred union itself?
Maybe
because we don't know any better.
I have two things to say after that. But Kelly, is Kelly saying something, or Nkosi? Who was saying something?
No, I don't think she was saying something.
Okay, you go, Nkosi.
So for me, it when you ask the how part, it just, the one thing that popped up in my mind was the teachings of Brother Heru last month, you know, when he said that at the moment where you understand that everything is God, you know, or the creator, or it's divinity, everything is divinity, the plants, if I see a person, you know, that is the reflection of it's the extension of divinity. It's just in a different form, you know. And when we respect everything and everyone from that angle, how then do you, and when you disrespect nature in others, it therefore means that you're disrespecting yourself. I think for me, it's the core foundation, therefore Ubuntu, you know. And once you start understanding that the feeling of wanting to hurt another human being, or the feeling of wanting to disrespect or misuse other people, it will not be there, because you would want to cherish the thing, and you would not want it to be hurt in some way, you know. And you will treat everything and every act that you do with respect. For me, that it just goes there. And once you get to that point, how then do you not want to please your partner? Because they're an extension of divinity in itself, in the same way that you are also an extension of divinity. And because when this conversation started, my son had this notion that God is somewhere in the sky. I'm like, God is everywhere. God is everywhere. Heaven and hell, it's all here, you know. This thing that they call heaven and hell, it's all here, you know. God is everywhere. So you must just get rid of that idea that there's a big guy somewhere in my field, you know. That is
I agree 100% with what you said, and I mean, I've missed out on like 2 sessions. It's been hectic this side, but I think brother, I should try Googling him afterwards, and I couldn't, and I'm not on Facebook, so I couldn't get more of, like, you know, just to try and follow him and stuff. But I think he explained, like, he broke down so many things, like he made things so simple, you know, like you wake up, breathe, you know, like breathing is not just, you're not just breathing for the sake of breathing, you know, like you're basically bringing life into, you know, and then going back to how you should have respect for, like, if you love and respect yourself, then you can then, obviously, you will, not obviously, but like the expectation would be, you will then extend that love and respect to the next human being that you're with, you know. And going back to, I mean, not that I want to go back to the thing, but I think it's you know, when you listen to, you know, when we use the word feminism, right, people tend to think which it's a men against female thing or whatever, you know. And I always laugh, because I always take away which, number one, I didn't even know a term called feminism, right? And I didn't even know what I could say I'm a feminist. But then I grew up knowing Gucci, I also have value. And why I felt that way is because I grew up with brothers, right? And then I could see and I'm an only girl. So then I could see how my grandparents, or the older generations, would treat me differently from my brothers. I could see how when I'm at my maternal, you know, grandparents' place, I would be waking up early to come and help clean or whatever. And yet at home, my parents, basically, you know, they would be like, everybody, all of us, today get cleaner, today, you know. So then there was never that distinction. So then I never chose to basically say Uguti, I also matter, you know, but somehow the world made me see Uguti, mainly based on my sex, nothing else, you know. I'm going to be treated differently. Not that they didn't love me. I mean, my grandparents loved me and stuff like that, you know. So then as I grow up, but then I think what I appreciated the most was, even with my parents, they made it clear. They didn't say it, and I won't lie and say they said it, but how they treated the children, and I was an only girl. It was clear that all of us will be taught to clean, all of us will be taught to cook, like it was in their actions, So hence, when I find myself fighting with me about, like as I grow up, and they're like, no, you cook. Hey, Kunjini son, I'm a feminism, Benin, because I'm the generation of Benin. I'm like, I mean, not Benin, Beijing. I'm like, wait, pause. Why, like, to me, it was confusion more than anything else, Witty. But why are these males fighting, for things which are obvious, like we should, and to me, it's not even about feminism or whatever, it's just about basic human rights and all of us just loving and respecting and, like okay, maybe let's drop titles, let's just, what is it? It's respect. And what is respect? It's also love, love yourself, love the next human being. Can you really say you love your wife? But we've got rules in this house. She must wake up at 3 a.m. to cook me. I'm a band and what. I struggle with that. Hey, to me, I'm like, yeah, I just went sideways.
Love with conditions. It's love with conditions.
Exactly. Yeah. And I agree with you. Hate people. But at the same time, I feel like it's dangerous to also understand, I feel like, okay, anyway, it's just life lessons, right? And I'm growing and I'm learning, and I think I've reached a point where I realized, Witty, when I try to understand, it's also dangerous because some of the answers I get are going to be difficult for me to, like, we can't understand everything, and I don't know if that makes sense. Like, to me, understanding is also dangerous. Like it's yeah, certain things are just understandable, and certain people are just mean, and we must just accept it. I think more than anything else, I've just learned, Witty, people project whatever, I must just try to know me, love me, respect me, and then hopefully I then project respect and love onto the world. Yeah.
Can I make examples? Can I make quick examples about certain heroines, modern heroines, who have also been subjected to a violation, like sexual violation, what they call sexual assault or rape, right? Some of my favorite heroes or heroines are people like Maya Angelou, and she has a very controversial story about how she treats or what she thinks of her rapists, because I think the first ones were relatives, an uncle or something like that, and then lovers and people that she knew. As usual, it's people that most of the time that And Oprah also shared the same story, Maya Angelou. But there's many others. I'm just talking about Black women. This is all true. Even white women too experience the same. But the way that these super powerful sisters handled this violation is quite different. But anyway, it seems like we're sliding back to that topic. I know it's an important topic, but I want to get back. I wanted to respond to something about how then now do we learn? How do we teach our sons and our daughters how to become better men, right? So outside in Zonkolela bayamemeza nabantu. But for me, I think is to create more spaces, like you are suggesting, let's record these spaces. No, it's not a matter of recording them. It's a matter of multiplying them. So the man on the mountain is a concept, an ancient African concept. We are redoing an ancient African concept where men would go into the wilderness. It's not about the mountain itself. The mountain is important, but it's about going in somewhere where there are other influences, where you don't see women, you don't see your mother, you don't see the cows that you are usually rearing, you don't see the work that you are actually doing. In the modern era, you don't see the factory that you work in, you don't see the boss, So it's about retreating, right, into a space whereby you are one with nature and you are with your teachers. Now, your teachers are not perfect men. The teachers are just there to guide you back to yourself. So, and the teachers are men who have done the work, though, right? It's not just anyone. Let me make a quick example. There's this issue of men go to the mountain, especially in this tradition of Uweluka, the circumcision. They go there to become men. But it has emerged not only through the fact that they are dying in so many numbers in that mountain. For me, it just shows that they're not only going there to become men, they're going there to face their worst fear. The fear of actual dying from painfully being cut, right? But now, originally, that whole system was guided by the whole community. But now it's removed from the community. The parents, the family releases the child, the boy child, into the wilderness to strangers. Before, the people that are doing the work were not strangers. They were known for their cleanliness, for their respect, for their knowledge, right? Cleanliness high is a very high thing. Every time I speak on culture, I always say, usiko lwesintu, usiko lwenhlonipho, nosiko lwenhlanzeko. This is my repeated mantra. The culture, the African culture is about respect and cleanliness, right? Now, when I speak about those things, I mean, we've spoken about it. We've had sessions, especially our earlier sessions, where we spoke about spiritual cleanliness, physical hygiene, and spiritual hygiene. I don't want to go into that. Part of sensuality has to do a lot with hygiene, So that is something that you learn at home. So if at home you do not have it, we need to replicate the man on the mountain model, the man in the wilderness model. Every great man, even in the biblical level, every great man who becomes a hero, every great hero has to go through a wilderness session by himself alone, or with other men who are going to guide him into finding himself. That's just for the man part. But for the woman part, I would say that I was telling Nkosi I was going to read from a book called Kusadliwa Ngoludala. It's a Zulu book. It's a book about Zulu culture. In it, Kusadliwa Ngoludala, it basically means how we used to do things in the past. The book is very specific. There's a chapter about Ukoma, which is basically courting each other. From the girl of 12, how a girl of 12 is prepared by elder girls to understand her own body, to understand nature, to understand the things that you use to wash yourself and your private part and your hair and your skin, how you wear certain things, certain beads, so all those things from age 12 upward to the age where you are ready to ukoma. And ukoma usually would happen between 15, 16, 17. You understand what I mean by ukoma, by the way? Yeah. So, so there's a whole thing. There's a whole sequence. So now we do not have that because we do not have those communities that are actual communities. So our actual communities are virtual, right? They are virtual communities, but there are also things that we can still do to actually recreate that and kind of change, not change it, what's the word? Adapt those very beautiful ancient Nguni ways, Nguni, Obasotu, or whatever. I'm sure almost every culture in Africa has these ways, where people are groomed from an early age to understand themselves, understand their body, understand, okay, now you are in your time as a young lady. What does it mean? What does it mean for you in nature? What does it mean for you to be clean? What does it mean for you, So all these things, everybody does them. But now I see, lastly, I have to say this. My sister will have to forgive me for this, my blood sister. I am seeing that a lot of our people, our African people, are adopting a lot of the Jewish religious rites of passage for the young women because they're adopting those Jewish ones. For me, I see it because the African way has been removed from us. They don't know what to do. They just don't know what to do. But the Jews have a template. You can go on Google and read about it. But for us, it's quite different. Everyone's African culture is their African culture. It's different from another family, or it's different from another one. All those complications are difficult. But for other nations, a Muslim girl from the age 10 grows up like this until she's married. Whether it's oppressive or suppressive, that's another thing we can discuss. But there is a tradition. So I'm saying that to restore sacred sexuality and sacred union, we need to find ways to adapt our original ways to the modern era and continue doing that, but also with understanding of feminism, understanding of sacred femininity from a holistic African culture, not just a specific African culture, Yamazulu or Yabasotho, but a holistic African culture, because there are things which are the same in Yoruba, that are the same in Dahomey, they are the same in Xhosa. That's all I wanted to say.
And I say that it actually made me think of something, you know, the ways of life that abo kokobe to be ngayo got lost and it was demonized, and at the same time the white people then said that type of way of living is cult living, right? So they tell us how if you are in a community, you are in a cult. You can't be doing those things because that's just cult behaviors. But then I and then afterwards, some of their people also steal our stuff and start cults. But anyway, I believe that you are right. Having communities that, and not even separate in Kulu, where we separate young men and young women. I feel like at a specific age group where they all learn at the same time and understanding respect at the same time. And it's all needed. And I think this is the beginning of it. Having it can be a natural healing, having about Afro Savvy. I see a lot of people are doing it, but introducing our kids to this type of living and having the open discussions that our parents didn't have with us. I like it when Umkulu said, what happens to a girl when she's 12? Segayile's cutting, she's being a woman, how to be clean. I don't remember having that type of conversation. I had to grow up winging it. And because I also grew up in boarding school, and you just go with it. You know, you just go with it. You don't even know whether it's right or wrong. And I think we need to really bring back that understanding of, you say we don't be manje. What is the next step? What does it mean? And even having the conversations with boys, you are now at that level where you're going to feel. And it doesn't make you feel less of yourself or this, whatever. Just having those open conversations within our homes, within our communities, within actually having people that are respected in the community to have this conversation with the young men. And
sure.
Yeah.
Nelly?
Yeah, because when they teach you about sex, it comes from, they teach you from a point where they're trying to instill fear within you.
Yeah.
Stay away from those boys.
Can I please take you guys back, please, because I missed the last two sessions. So the season, the Great Mother Uheteru, when does it run? Like when we say this month, Sister Nelly, are we ending Monday, the 1 October, or are we going into November?
So Mother Uheteru is from the 23rd of October and up until the 22nd. But it depends on Google calendar you put inside.
I see.
But the
No. Yeah, no. I'm all for what you guys are following, because I'm trying to align too. So yeah, I get, yeah.
Okay, so it's 23rd October until 22nd November.
All right.
You guys are bringing me. You are bringing me to a point of contention whereby I'm gonna fight with Nita. I owe Nita an email on of these calendars.
Thank you for,
now, explain something
I like how in the court of law we would have said that you are guilty of something that you haven't done.
I know.
But when you also there's something that Nkosi said, just on Kelle's point, then you can continue, Mkulu. She said at the beginning of the session, she says that this is the season of being lax, right? I think she said that everything is lax, indulgement, humunati, man. Another thing that I actually have noticed also with this season of being lax spiritually, I've realized that a lot of you're not really spiritually heightened, if that makes sense. abantu bakho are also as lax as you are. You know, they don't come harshly. Your spiritual self is not busy. You relaxed. You know, and I also noticed that spiritually, even if it's not about the human experience, but spiritually being a healer, even your own people are lax. It's a more it's a more comfortable season. There's not so much sleepless nights. There's not so much heightened dreams. There's not so much, you know, hearing this and that, but everything just flows. Everything is just do you. I feel like it's a do you season.
It probably is, you know. And for me, I think a lot of people, they get confused with spirituality. Serious. And no, sometimes you know, go play with the other kids, you know, and that it heals something within you as well, you know. I would enjoy myself slight impepho, and no. Sometimes you need that element where you dance, you know, and you listen to music and you relax.
Yeah, I must say this.
True.
I must read this. I'm gonna read this because it's what part of the month of Heteru. It says the principle of Heteru, Tiwanla. One of the functions of Heteru's temple in ancient times was healing, as she also brings great peace to the troubled mind. I like that part because it goes to what Nita is saying about relaxation and all that. Peace of mind, you know, it's a part of having peace, cultivating that peace of mind within you. And Tiwalanage, her lunar powers allow dreams to present remedies and solutions to conflicts in the emotions and thoughts. So it's conflict resolution also. Imagine, you know, I have to say this, you know, some people, I don't know, some call it different things, but there is this thing sometimes in sensuality, where you make love to Kolelana. What do you call that? Like Kolelana, like that kind of sex where you're having it to
Makeup sex.
Makeup sex, yeah, like that makeup sex. But then not to become toxic about it, to say, okay, I'm gonna fuck up and then I'm going to give you a gift and do makeup sex. No, not in that way. Makeup sex, in effect, that almost like it's an anniversary sex. I don't know if that makes sense. Like,
yes, it's organic.
Yeah, you can make this month, you can make these things, you know, with these calendars, you can create a certain timeline. Not that you're not going to have sex in June or in December, but there is going to be a certain ritual. This is part of the healing. You can do a certain ritual that at this particular month, your sexual act is very consciously geared towards that. If you are in a partnership, it's going to be easy to do that.
That's so interesting.
So that you create a sacred shrine for your sexual act. I don't know how I'm going to do that in my house because my children are all over. There's no peace. There's no peace in any room. I need a bigger house, but I'm working on that right now. But the point I'm making is there needs to be a space, a way of creating that sacredness, in particular this month, because the energy is heightened for that particular act, for that particular peace of mind, so that when you do connect, you're connecting from that knowledge. Both of you are doing that. So that helps. So it also kind of, the tricky part is that it also kind of says that your partner has to be, you have to communicate with our partners in such a way that they understand what time it is. You can't just spring upon the person and say, I want to get November, since I'm November.
But this is so beautiful, Mkulu, what you're mentioning now. I mean, imagine if so many of our relationships, if we did this and we knew it, you know, it's almost like you're an anniversary, like you are recommitting, and it's beautiful. Thank you.
So what also helps me, I think, also fasting, you know, like fasting when you eventually do engage, fasting from the deed. When you eventually do engage, it almost feels like, oh, it's new, you know. For me, it besides the makeup sex, but also fasting from sex for iskashanyan. For me,
no, but I think we got Mkhulu. It wasn't really makeup sex, but more that reconnecting.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Makeup sex, but planned, not making up mistake. You're planning, like that fasting that Coco is talking about. For those of us who are married, know that there are certain like dry seasons, like for real. Like I won't even go to the detail. You know, a friend of mine before I got married actually told me this. We were having a lunch with him, me and my wife to be at that time, and he was like, guys, just you must know. He said, "Welcome to the house of hunger." You know, he was married for like 10 years before that. So he was like, what do you mean? We didn't understand. In the beginning of, first few years of our marriage, we were like, this guy he was talking about his situation, not our situation. Now, yeah, I won't go into it. All I can tell you that the fasting is not always voluntary.
meaning that in November is literally this season, meaning it's to reignite the fire. It's the season to reignite that fire.
And I think last month we spoke about.
Mkhulu, you're muted.
You're muted.
No, sorry. No, Nelly, I have to repeat this. What Nelly? Between me and Nelly, because we're about to close now in a minute. Nelly, we had been planning to do a particular kind of calendar before we start sending them to people. We have a calendar that we have repurposed for Ikhambi, but it is actually from the Great Empire of Kemet. And the Great Empire of Kemet had got it from the book that I think we have shared with most of you, The Sacred Magic. I think everyone in this chat should have that book, Sacred Magic.
No, we don't, Mkhulu. You haven't sent it.
Okay, I'm going to send it. Hey, as soon as we drop, I'm going to go inside and I'm going to send you this book.
Do you have the emails?
I'm saying I'm going to now, after we drop.
Yes, so we have given you our emails, even on the chat.
Get wrong. Please write me those emails and send them to me. I will send them right now. So, because I can't write them down.
I haven't seen any emails like my chats. I think it's much easier if we inbox her in the Facebook page, or send us an email at Ikhambi, Ikhambihealing
calendar
at gmail.com.
It's a good calendar, but it needs a deep explanation for you to actually get to understand it. But we only person. She's been working, and Nami and Mkhulu who we used to work with, we had a way we were attacking the calendar from a particular angle so that people just understand it easily. Why does a month, for example, begin on the 23rd instead of the 1st? You know, so there are those things. You will get the book, you will understand, but it's a thick book. Yeah, I just needed to say that. My people. Nelly, say something.
Nelly, please give me your email address again, please. I'm not on Facebook. I'll send you an email.
Just give me a second so that I make sure that I get it correctly.
Okay.
Because
go away.
Healing.
Sing it. Watch your head.
Umkhulu uyasikhalisela uthi nathi sibe nama-triplets nama-twins. Hayi abomkhulu bona noma sebaflexa, umkhulu uyaflexa. Hey.
I'm showing you what I'm showing you a piece of my troubles.
It's gmail.com, not koza.com. It's gmail.com.
Yeah. .com, yeah. No, it's Gmail. Yeah.
It's gmail.com. But you can also find us on YouTube. It can be Natural Healing. Instagram, it can be Natural Healing. YouTube and Instagram, Yimeng is Menajayo. And then Facebook, means was Menajayo. But I'll pass on.
Right, yeah.
Either way.
Also, can I suggest, Nkosi, can I put this calendar that we do have on our blog? Just post it on the blog so people can download it themselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll do that too.
For next, before we close the session, I just wanted to make it like a short announcement. The next session is not for people under 18. You need your earphones if you like so you need your earphones. It is not for children. It is not for under 18. We will be talking about sexual health. We've invited abantu abazi kangcono kahle ukuthi sexual health. What does that even mean? I think I still need to confirm also. I think the guest after is also going to speak about sexual health as well. It's a big conversation because we need to understand it from both angles, the male and the female, and then how do we then meet in the middle? So that because sexual health, it's different, although it's different, but I need to also know what's going on with my partners. Such a right, you know. Yeah. So yeah, the next session, it's not for under 18. So yeah, Kulu, can you please close the session for us? Are you still there? Brother Menzi? Okay. With that being said, thank you so much for holding.
One love.
Asikuzwanga mkhulu, yes.
Busy.
She's one love.
One love.
That's what I was saying. I'm in a situation. I can't even talk. Bang attack. So I can't actually even speak. I'm just saying goodbye. We'll see you all next week. We'll see you on YouTube.
Okay.
One love.
Peace. Thank you for holding space with us. We will see each other on the next session. Hopefully we can get also another herbalist, but Aranza they just tell me say unezimbiza uzosibonisa ukuthi sihlanganiswa kanjani as well Naya. So Naya, I don't think it's a preparation method session, but also I don't think since imbiza zakhona ezocansi, I don't think kids should be there as well. So with that being said, blessed, enjoy the rest of your evening. Love and light.
Togos.